My name is Lauren Hunt. I work for the Air Force Research Laboratory. Right now, I do a lot of work with small businesses, helping them explore their technology and their products, fits or use cases with the DoD. Before that, I was with a small satellite portfolio. And if you go back decades at this point, I was a student in UNP myself. So I've been around for a while. I love talking about the concept review. I love this portion of mission planning because it's all about ideas. And so what I hope today is a little bit of a strategy session for you guys. To do that, we're going to start with a little bit of a warm-up that has nothing to do with your missions. SCR and all of this mission design phase is about asking questions, it's about exploring possibilities. So before you move, let me explain do, and then we're going to kind of get up and pair off. We're going to have each of you pair program. Each of you are going to decide what role you're going to be. Someone is going to be a soon-to-be vacationer, and someone is going to be the travel agent. And you are going to have 5 minutes to talk to your client if you're the designated travel agent and find out all you can about what kind of vacation they want. So that's all I'm going to say for right now. You're going to have 5 minutes to do that. Use your paper, write down notes. Don't try to memorize it. Find someone and we'll pair off and have 5 minutes. So now what we're going to do is you're going to have 10 minutes to plan that vacation for your client. If you were the vacationer, you are also planning a vacation based on what you told your client. The catch here is I want you to plan what you think is the ideal vacation based on what you heard. I also want you to answer all of these questions. So if you already asked it, amazing. But if you didn't ask it, guess, right? So you're going to guess what is the answer to this question based on what you heard from your client. But 10 minutes to plan that ideal vacation, answer anything that you took notes on, but also these questions here. You might make a bulleted list, however you want to do it. And then when we're done with the 10 minutes, you're going to present your vacation to your client. And the client is also going to then compare with the kind of vacation that they design themselves. Okay. So everyone is designing a vacation, 10 minutes starting now. Does that make sense? I want you to make this as an amazing a vacation as you can for your client based on what they said. Time is up. Okay, so here's what's going to happen next. I want you guys to take 5 minutes. The travel agent is going to present the vacation to the client. As you're going through it, travel agent, I want the client to be giving you some feedback on your selections. And then once that's done, I want the vacationer to share how they actually built out their vacation. So let's do a little comparison there. Where did you see some differences? Where were you on the same page? So 5 minutes to share out that vacation, get some feedback, and then hear how the vacationer planned it themselves. And let's see where you guys got. 5 minutes starting now. Okay, I hope you had some great conversations. First and foremost, I want to hear from all the vacationers. Where are we traveling? Because we should all benefit from knowing what great ideas you have.
Madrid.
Madrid, I love it. Okay.
Bora Bora.
Ooh, okay. I signed it over here.
Dubai.
Dubai. Greece. I love it. Okay.
Cruise to Hawaii.
Cruise to Hawaii. Perfect. You guys are, I love it. Okay, great. Where are we going?
Italy.
Italy. Ooh, very good. Okay.
In St. Thomas.
Thomas. Okay, perfect. How about we love it.
Thank you, right?
Okay, love it. Cruise around the Caribbean. Okay. So, oh, I like it. Low Earth orbit is what someone just shouted out. I love it. Okay, so I kind of was not very consistent with my wording, but in the very beginning, I never specified if this was a dream vacation, if this was a vacation you could afford to take tomorrow, or we're going to do this year. What did you guys assume? Dream vacation. Okay, is that what everyone pretty much did? Dream vacation? Anyone take a different path? Affordability. Okay, so there was a little bit of variation here. Vacationers, who had a hard time knowing right away everything that they should tell their travel agent about what they cared about most in a vacation? Just raise your hands if there were things that were hard to think of as you were doing it. I hope the answer is yes. You know, there's no right or wrong, but like if you can tell your whole vacation in 5 minutes, I definitely want to come talk to you about mission design a little bit because it's hard, right? 5 minutes is a hard constraint. Travel agents, as you told your client about their vacation plans and compared it with their self plans, what kind of extra information was revealed that you didn't think about as you were making the plan? Did anyone have a situation?
Maybe like activities that weren't considered previously, like stuff that the client wanted to get done during their vacation that weren't considered.
Okay, so yep, perfect. Activities that weren't considered. What else? Oh, food. Okay, yep, food. Absolutely.
I like the schedule, the same activities, but just different days.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm repeating a few things just to make sure folks online can hear. Order of activities, the schedule, when things happen. Some of the questions I put up there for like, where are they going to sleep? Some of us are going to get up right first thing in the morning and have a full itinerary. You had a comment right here. Where they're coming in from. Yep. Great one. Anything else that was revealed as you were kind of comparing things you didn't consider because you didn't have the full perspective and or time to really dig into it? I heard a great question over here that I didn't even, you asked, do you get seasick? And I loved that question, right? Because again, if you have preferences, right, for how you travel, or you're afraid of turbulence, that's going to impact, right, how you might travel, but you don't always think about that when you're thinking about the logistics of a vacation for someone else, right? Travel agents, did any of you get asked to plan a vacation that you had no experience with? Like you have never been overseas maybe, or you just had never been to that location or that type of vacation? So how did you compensate for that? How did you work around that? Asking more questions. Okay, perfect. Vacationers, what kind of options were your travel agents able to offer you that you did not think about yourself that actually sounded kind of fun? And if you were to go on this vacation, you might want to do that kind of thing or stay in that type of place. Was there anything on that list that you didn't think about that your travel agent did?
Language barriers.
Language barriers. I love that.
Some of the extreme activities offered, like base jumping or like sea breachers.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Extreme activities.
Skydiving into a soccer game.
Skydiving into a soccer game. Okay, we've gone creative. I love it. Anything else from this side? Oh, that sounds nice. Sleeping on huts on the water. Okay, perfect. A different alternative if you couldn't go during the season.
Thinking off-peak hours, which I wasn't aware.
Oh, off-peak hours. Okay, perfect. Were the alternatives acceptable to you, vacationers? Were there any ones that were wildly different from what you were expecting, or was it like, we're just going to go to another tropical island instead of the one I planned for you? Did anyone come up with a totally different? Oh, I love that. And was it an acceptable alternative? Okay. So what was the core piece of the vacation you really wanted to achieve that made that
She
great?
said you like hiking, historic stuff, sending on a mission thing, so I figured that has some of that.
I love that example because that is really getting at the core of what are you trying to get out of a vacation, right? That's very similar to what we do in mission design when we are thinking about alternatives. So that is perfect and amazing. Okay, very good. Well, we're going to dive right back in. So wrapping up the kind of this exercise, why did I pick planning vacations? Well, number one, it's fun and I want to know where you're all going. Everyone has great ideas, but also really this idea, like missions, vacations should serve their purpose. I had a lot of whys on there, right? So what kind of vacation are you after? Something super fun, something relaxing, something inspiring. Same thing with missions. You're really going to be diving into the why of it. Vacations, there's not going to be a single perfect vacation that is perfect for all of us, but the more varied your questions are and the more questions you ask, the more perfect vacation you're going to be able to plan for the client at hand. You do trades all the time in your life. You have to make choices. And also, you already know that different perspectives and different experiences in our lives can help us ask different questions. So whether you were the travel agent or the vacationer, you each brought something different to the conversation. That is exactly the same thing that happens in mission design, and especially when we're talking about things like system concept review. Okay, so let's go now back into the task at hand, what you guys are going to be working on as you're prepping for system concept review. So where are you right now? A proposal was submitted by your PI. How many of you helped work on that proposal? Okay, just a small handful. So how many of you were given the proposal and know what your professor wrote? About 50-50. System concept review, or SCR, is really one of those first check-ins that happens during mission design, just to make sure you're on the right track, that you're thinking about all the pieces early on so that you don't have impacts that you weren't expecting when you get to later stages. So after you go through system concept review, you have the next major thing is system requirements review. Later stages are going to get longer and more technical in the review depth, preliminary design review, concept design review. So what's really happening in these reviews? What are the reviewers looking for? You can think about it in the high level in a couple different areas. Number one, we're really just trying to understand what are your mission or your science objectives. And you're going to see the what and the why questions come up over and over and over again. So definitely mission objectives and success criteria need to be identified at the system concept review. And you're going to see reviewers spending a lot of time talking about the objectives that you've chosen, the criteria that you've chosen. This is the time where you want to have those nailed down as well as you possibly can, so that everything that flows after it can reference that back. So you'll see reviewers, again, spending a lot of time thinking about, why did you choose those numbers? Why did you choose that wording? And you saw in the CARSAT, which became ShipSat example, that those things morphed, right, as the conversations happened. So that's why they're going to be paying attention to those kinds of things. System concept review and all the work that you're doing up to that point is really a plan that articulates what information do you need to gather and analyze to achieve your mission outcomes. So once you have those objectives and success criteria identified, it's really now that conversation about what's your plan for getting to those. And so talking through those different pieces. To really understand that, it's also about an initial system concept. You're going to be presenting that. What you're trying to do is help people understand that you know how your objectives, your success criteria are going to be accomplished. So what are the science and the data, and how are they going to be collected? What can you realistically do? Are there critical mission geometries that you have to have? I have a funnel up here, because in all of those bullets, what we're really talking about are three key areas: a firm mission concept. This includes a lot of the background story. Again, that why of when you see a mission objective or a success criteria statement, there's a lot of background story about how did you get to those. You want to communicate that, because that's giving clues to the reviewers about why did you hone in on the specific words that you used. So mission concept, the compelling story, right? Again, diving into the why pieces and that system approach. What comes out when you have all three of those elements together are really clearly expressed mission outcomes. So a way to think about this is, say you get through your entire mission, it's wildly successful. What does a final report look like? What would you say in a final report? What would you say in a paper about this mission? Not only what you did, what you collected, what was the importance of it? How did you do it? What are you going to do with this information now that you have it? This is also going to be the place where you have that identification of your initial design drivers and your constraints. If you know that there are pieces that have either come out from your analysis or are just constraints based on your university program or some of your stakeholders, those are going to get identified here, because again, they're informing all of these different pieces and helping you decide how to move things around. I hope that sounds really simple, but also it's really easy to have 2 out of the 3 bubbles in the funnel here. It's really easy sometimes to be an amazing bus developer. You have all your avionics figured out, you know exactly how the satellite is going to work, but to maybe have a little bit of a weak mission statement, right? Why are you actually doing this? Or maybe conversely, you have a really good reason for why you want to send a satellite up into space, but maybe you're a little bit weaker on the system approach. That's totally natural, but you want to kind of figure out where you are on those pieces and is everything balanced together. And again, kind of going back to the idea that not all of you were part of the original proposal writing. Maybe not all of you have read the proposal. How did you find out about the mission that your university is doing? If you weren't part of the proposal writing process or haven't gone in depth reading it, how did you find out? Okay, it was emailed to you. How about you? Joining a club. And so what happened there? Okay, so the club has taken the products from the senior design and is now moving it forward. Okay, great. Anyone else? Okay, I am asking those questions because these are very typical types of questions to see at an SCR. And because you all came to your missions in different ways, and you might not have the answers to all of these questions, but I can guarantee that these questions will be asked if you aren't kind of already building them into your soundtrack, into your slides for system concept review. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to point out a couple different ones. Why are you interested in this experiment? You know, what is that background story that you can say about it? Who is your customer? We've talked about that a lot, both at the kickoff and hopefully you got some of that at the mission overview. Customer is really just another way of saying who cares about this mission and why, right? And so you want to have a clear story here. And it's not just the scientific community, right? It's a specific group that is going to use the data maybe in some way. The other thing I want to point out about some of these questions is that they can be a little bit layered. So sticking with who is your customer, and you said, my effort is all about farming in space. I don't see the relevance to that, or can you help me understand the relevance here? The answer to that question might have been, there's zero relevance, right? But that was an amazing question to ask for a couple reasons. If the answer had been no, great. You don't need to talk to that person anymore, right? They're not your people. But what you actually got was a very cool answer. Well, we're not interested maybe in the primary piece that you care about, but there are underlying technologies that you're going to have to introduce into your system that we're going to care about. So what's really cool about that is you're going to go off and you're going to find your key customers or key people who care about that mission. But now you've built in this secondary group of people who care about it. And oh, by the way, the systems that we have to build to support farming in space, this group also cares about those technologies. So when we get done with this mission, we're going to be able to talk to them about that. Or even better than that, if I get stuck and I don't know how to handle some of the technological design of my system, now I have this other group that I know that I can go talk to about how to maybe do that. The other question that I'm going to point out here, because it 100% always gets asked, is why does this experiment need to be done in space? There are a lot of experiments or missions where sometimes you can really get the information that you need on the ground, right? Through ground testing. So you have to be very clear about why is being in space so important, because you personally are going to invest a lot of time in doing a system design, in getting this thing ready and seeing it through to the end. A lot of effort all around will be put into that. So you want to be very clear on that. So what I would like to do is take 2 minutes. For those of you who have your computers, if you have your mission overviews handy, bring those up and kind of use them as a reference guide. For those of you just working off paper, it's okay. Flip your paper over. We're going to make a lot of lists here. I want you to kind of go through this list here, take 2 minutes, write down maybe a thought. If there's a question on here where you feel like you don't have a good answer yet, I want you to write that one down, right? This is something where I need to dig in a little bit more. Take 2 minutes, think about those questions. Okay, now I want you to take 1 extra minute and look at your list of things where you think you need to dive a little bit deeper, get some better answers. In the next 5 to 8 days, I want you to think about what can you actually do to get those answers. Maybe it's scheduling a Zoom call with your PI to ask questions. Maybe it's digging into some of the documentation from that senior design class. But I want you to go through your bullet list and actually think of what is a no kidding step I can take. Maybe it's reading some literature, right? Some papers out there to see if this experiment has been done before. Whatever you put as a focus area on your list, use 1 minute now to think about what's a no kidding step you can take in the next 5 to 8 days to get that answer so that when you show up to SCR, you're ready to go. The reason that reviewers are so interested in these questions is because it's giving them context, right? So if they don't hear it from you, and again, the strategy is build it in as much as you can into your slides, into your soundtrack. But if they don't hear it from you, they're going to ask because they want the context, that background for why you chose your objectives and your success criteria. They're also asking because these are key areas to watch out for. It's helping them understand feasibility. It's also maybe going to help them suggest to you an off ramp, right? That if you get too far down the path and this doesn't look like it's closing, here's an off ramp you might consider. It's also going to help them clarify your goals, your approach. So all of this is about helping you maximize value. So those questions are great, but how do I actually start building out my slide deck and thinking about preparing for SCR? So remember, we're after a compelling story, mission concept, and system approach. The good news about this, and for you guys, it's a little bit mixed because you're maybe just starting, is that SCR is not new material, right? It's building off of all the things you are already doing that you have already been working on. Sometimes in regular UNP cycles, I'll look at SCR slides and then I will look at some of the documentation that the team has provided and they do not match, right? It's clearly like different content. You do not want that to happen, right? What that tells me is someone sat down, they created their slides and they were kind of pulling it from their head. They're thinking about each of these different areas rather than going back to their core documentation in whatever form that's in and pulling that forward into the slide deck. You want consistency across everything you're creating to make sure that no matter who on your team is looking at your documentation products, that you are all on the same page about what you are doing. In UNP, they bring them together in the mission design document. So what's in the mission overview? This is, again, something that you probably already have completed, right? Because you've already done your mission overview presentations. Now you're going to be writing that more maybe into Word format. So it's that high level intro into your mission and the supporting satellite system. It's absolutely going to include, at minimum, those mission objectives, the minimum and full success criteria. It's going to have a discussion on relevance. It's going to have any background that you can provide that got you to those places. And it's also going to highlight any constraints that you know that you have now, right? Constraints can be wide and varied. Sometimes they're technical, but sometimes they're programmatic. You're going to include all of those in that mission overview. Remember, the program or mission design slides are really good reference material, but good objectives are specific. They define meaningfulness. They're tied to data products, and they provide that context to go off and do. So as you're looking at those things, make sure that you feel comfortable with the wording that you've chosen there. The next element is that experiment plan. This is not a step-by-step procedure. So it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, and I get this data product. The experiment plan is that big picture overview of what is really going on with this experiment. What does the satellite need to perform? What are maybe some conditions that you have to set up or take into consideration in order for the satellite to perform that experiment? If you know what your payload is, you might be talking through what is that payload being used? What is it measuring or performing? Maybe you have a TBD on the actual payload, but again, you know what data you need in the end. You're talking through those pieces in an experiment plan. You might also call out if there are any high-level vehicle operations, right, that need to be taken into consideration for this experiment. Like for car sat, which then became ship sat, you had to be pointing in a particular direction, right? Like those are kinds of high-level considerations that now give you the clues in your system design for what kind of subsystems you need, so what kind of performance that might need to be there. So the experiment is what helps drive some of those key pieces, right, of your later design. And then that third element right there is the concept of operations. So again, phases and modes of the system are going to be described here. And really what you're trying to include is a timeline and spacecraft operations. There should be detailed descriptions in the user guide, so you don't have to know offhand, right? Reference back to that document. The key thing with the ConOps here is you don't, especially now, want this to be a generic piece, right? Everyone has to launch. So you don't need to really spend a lot of time. You might have that on your figure, but for ConOps, what you're really trying to hone in here, especially for SCR, is what is the critical piece in your ConOps that is really related to your objectives or your experiment plan, so that you can talk through that and really help people understand how are you trying to do the things that really need to be done. So that's where you want to spend your time in terms of what are you highlighting on ConOps. Okay, so how far along should I be in these documents? By SCR, what's typical for mission overview is that you have a really comprehensive first draft. Again, everything about mission overview, success criteria, objectives, that's the whole reason why you're doing any of this. So that should be really well known. You shouldn't really have a lot of TBDs or pieces. Make sure you're focusing here and that you're figuring out or asking the questions that you need to ask. For the experiment plan by SCR, what you really have is a decent first draft. You're trying to understand what activities are happening, some relationship to order or timeline to the extent that you know it. You might have TBDs on hardware or software. That's okay. Call it out, but say it's a TBD, right? Just put it in there. But those high-level needs that are going to meet the mission objectives should be called out. For ConOps, you are going to be in your first draft stage of this. And really all you're trying to do here, ConOps is going to get a lot more detailed as you go through each of the reviews. What you're really trying to highlight are those critical events or sequences, right? If you have an experiment that can only happen once, that is something you want to talk about right here. That's the kind of thing that is maybe a critical event or a sequence, right? Because you want to have that conversation about how do you do that well? How do you take into consideration all the things so that if you can only do your experiment once, you're set off on a good foot. Lots of good questions are also asked in those mission design basic slides. So go back through that presentation too, and there are extra questions that you can reference. So what I want to do now is pause for 5 minutes, and I want you to kind of self-assess, where are you now in your mission design doc? Do you have all three of these pieces? What is the most important thing for you to focus on over the next 5 days, right, before you have to turn it in? As you're thinking about what's the most important thing to focus on, I also want you to think about what's the kind of supporting evidence you can show to first and foremost convince yourself, but then convince other people that the system concept closes. So another way to think about that is you're looking for red flags, right? A simple example might be maybe you still really need to do a trade study on the best payload for your mission, but you've been able to find at least one payload that can do what you need to do, right? If you have done a little bit of searching and you have no idea how you're going to find a payload to do the thing that you need to do, that's food for thought, right? And your strategy leaving SCR. So take 5 minutes and think about these 3 areas. Where are you? Where do you need to go in the next 5 days? Strategize about that. The other thing to think about as you're choosing your strategy for how to prepare for SCR is also thinking about where are you going after SCR. So I mentioned at the very beginning that What comes after SCR is the systems requirements review. So the goal is that when you leave SCR, you have enough information where you can begin to develop the requirements for your whole system. And so when you look back and you think about all the content that you have there, is it enough to basically go off and go do those pieces? I'm not going to go through all of the detail on the right-hand side of these slides. This is literally taken from the user's guide. So this is not new content. It's literally just cut and paste. But there are 4 different figures in the user's guide about the whole flow, right, of the timeline of mission design. And so each of these blocks is what's happening between SCR and SRR. So for example, on mechanical, you're going to be looking at that basic structure concept. You're going to be considering look angles or field of view that's important to you. Maybe your power generation services that are going to drive the layout. As one example, on avionics, again, you're going to be looking at what are your mission needs and how is that driving some of the design. Do you have a high power system maybe that you're thinking about? Do you have high data needs? Those are all going to flow into the requirements. So again, I won't go through all of these, but if you're looking at anything on this list and thinking, I don't really know how I'm going to get to this next step based on what I know about my system concept so far, now's the time to ask a little bit of questions. It's not to say you have to have all the design work done, but maybe you know that the next set of questions you need to ask, okay? So that you can get to that next piece of system requirements review successfully. So now I want to switch gears a little bit. Those are the mechanics of what goes into your soundtrack and the content you're going to be pulling together. When you look at the template, you'll see a lot of those same pieces again about your mission overview, your experiment plan, your ConOps. What I want to talk about in our last little bit here is things to keep in mind. Let's talk about, again, things to keep in mind that might not always be obvious to you as you're going into SCR. The first thing is, in an ideal case, reviewers have read your documentation. So they've read your mission design document that you spent hours and hours pouring into. That is not always the case. So when you get to SCR, it's to your advantage in getting the best quality feedback to be as clear and detailed as you can in the time you have available. Don't assume that they know your acronyms. Don't assume that they know anything about the kind of experiment that you're trying to run, that they have a background in it. Anything related to farming, I'm going to have no clue, right, about what's involved in that, right? So think about how you can provide a little bit of familiarity so that everyone can start off on the same page. It's been corrected this round, but I'll throw it out there that for this slide deck last year, I didn't define SCR anywhere in these slides. So it was a major faux pas, right? And I didn't realize it until I was speaking. And here's the crazy thing. 3 other people had also looked through these slides, but no one caught it because it was such a familiar word to us, right? And so we didn't even think about it. So be thoughtful, right, about how you're thinking about those pieces and how you're defining things that you think everyone is going to understand. The other thing is the soundtrack, again, I've said it many times, is as important as the slides. You are not going to be able to shove everything you want to put on the slides on the slides. So really talking through and giving as much background and explanation, not just of the why of your mission, but even when you start getting to budgets, you know, things like that. How did you arrive at some of those conclusions? What assumptions did you make? You want to talk through as much of that as you have time for. You do not want to finish SCR early. There is no bonus prize for finishing SCR early. Use that time available to you. So the reason that that soundtrack matters is reviewers are listening to everything that you say in addition to what's on those slides, and they're like a sounding board. They're going to come back to you and say, I heard you say this was important, but I don't see it reflected in the way that you've defined your objectives. Let's talk about where reality is. So talking as much as you can in addition to the content on the slides is helpful there. The other thing is a template is the starting line, not the finish line. So I really encourage you that when you see that template, don't say, if I just fill out these slides, I have everything that I need, right? Those are the core elements that everyone is going to need across their missions, but you each have unique things that you really want to focus on, right? Maybe if you have a really power hungry kind of mission, you're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. Maybe if you have a really detailed ConOps that you really want some feedback on, you're going to spend extra slides really making sure that that is super clear. Or maybe there's a topic that we haven't even talked about, but you know is really important for people to know. You're going to include that slide in there. Think back to how we did that vacation exercise in the beginning. If you had just had a vacation based off of the 5 minutes that your travel agent had to hear everything, would you have been fully satisfied with the vacation that would have come out of that? Maybe. That would be ideal, but maybe not, right? So think about what's that extra content that's unique to your situation that is going to help people, help you frame what you're trying to get out of it. I want you to just take 1 minute right now and think about beyond mission overview, experiment plan, or ConOps, what extra info might you want to put into your slide set for SCR? So just 1 minute, think about anything that comes to mind. No one's going to hold you to it, so if you cross it off later, it's fine. Other things to keep in mind. A successful review does not mean that you're guaranteed to succeed in your mission. There's no pass-fail coming out of SCR. It's really going to be about the conversation you had and how is that helping guide you forward in your next steps. So what does that really mean? It's a temperature check that from the expertise available to you, that things make sense and that you might be on the right track, right? Not all reviewers are going to have the exact same expertise that you have. It's going to be a mix depending on who's coming to your review. So you're getting the best of what they have to offer. Sometimes reviews can feel really harsh. I don't know how you guys felt getting question and answers. Maybe you guys are totally okay with it. I definitely can be a nervous presenter sometimes. So like it's totally normal to have those feelings as you're getting commentary coming at you. What I really want to remind you is that reviewers are not here to judge you, okay? The questions are coming fast and hard because they want you to arrive at a solution that is going to work for you. And the best thing about the MC experience is after that reviewer has given you a specific piece of feedback, there's a good chance you might see some of those folks again, right, circulating. And you can ask questions, you can ask for clarification, you can tell them, I really just don't know how to do this and I need some help. So it's not the end of everything when you're engaging with the reviewers in SCR. No questions or discussion from reviewers does not necessarily mean you had a good review. Sometimes that's actually a really big red flag that you've missed something or haven't brought the right elements together to give them enough information to comment on what's happening. A successful, quote unquote, if you will, SCR means that you've had a lot of conversation about what you're doing, what's working, what's not, what do you need to consider. And in fact, it should be on this slide, but underline, it's very important to remember, it is very, very common to come out of SCR with a totally modified mission. I'm going to repeat that again. It is very, very common to come out of an SCR with a modified mission, because as you're describing what's important to you, what you care about, they're going to give you feedback and some ideas on maybe how to think about that differently, how to approach it from different ways. So if you come out of SCR and you have a totally new idea based on the feedback you received about how to do that, that is a win. Okay, that is a sign of success. It is not a failure to have a different way of doing things now. Again, just going back to the vacation example, and I'll point out, you guys on the end right over here, you had a very wildly different vacation that was still going to be satisfactory, right? That is the kind of thing that you want to think about as you're having your conversations at SCR. The other thing that is really important to note is your team is in charge of what you do with the information that comes out of SCR. There's not going to be an MC person that is now giving you the checklist of things that you have to do, right? So number one, just like at mission kickoff, where they told you in the guidance, you might get conflicting information. Your team's going to have to decide what to do with that, right? You might get advice from an expert on what they would do or what they tell you you should do, right? You're going to have to decide how you're handling that situation. That doesn't mean totally ignore it and just say, I don't want to deal with that, or that's not what we're about. You want to have a way to address, here's why we're going down this path, but ultimately you guys are in charge of how your mission is being designed. So think about that. The other piece that's related to that is have a strategy for how you're going to capture the information. Who on your team is taking notes at SCR? Again, no one from the MC team is going to hand you a list, right? So how are you capturing that? Or even better, someone from another team to come to your SCR and take notes for you, right? Because now your team can be fully focused on the conversation, but you already know you have someone that's taking notes for you. Make note of who was at your review, right? So if they happen to be circling back around in different windows as you guys are working, you can have extended conversation with them. So to the extent you can do that, go ahead and do that. The other thing too here is there might be some strategy in attending other reviews. So I've really focused on the reviewers, but there's a huge untapped pool of talent, your other participants, right? So if you notice another university is really good at doing something you don't understand, or they have some similarities in how they're approaching their mission, you guys aren't competitors. Like, go exchange information, right? Go talk to them, go ask for advice, right? So that you can learn from each other. So let's take 1 minute and I want you to think about, number one, what are you trying to get out of SCR? What is going to help you the most from that conversation in advancing to the next stage? And think about, where do you think you really need feedback? So again, you can guide the conversation. So 1 minute, what are you trying to get out of SCR? Where do you need help? So maybe you'll focus the conversation for SCR. What's going to help you advance? Last major slide for today, a couple of final thoughts here. So before you get to the review, that is really the time to think about alternative ways of accomplishing your mission. As you're starting to work through the details, it's really easy to kind of get into that mindset of like, this is how we should do it, right? This is what we're doing. This is what we really care about. Now is the fun time, and hopefully you do view it as fun, of imagining different possibilities, right? To different ways of imagining how you might accomplish what you're setting out to do. Just like in, again, going to CARSAT to ShipSat, they totally revised, right, what they were thinking about in terms of what was important in that example. You really want to be able to do this and imagine different possibilities, because what it does is, by trying to explore different ways to implement, it helps you understand what is really important to you, right? If there's truly only one way to do the mission you have in mind, what that means is that you have some really strong mission drivers and also some strong constraints, right? And so it's really going to help you clarify what those pieces are. So it's good for pulling those pieces out. But also, if you are able to imagine different ways of doing it, it's going to help you, again, refine that, what's really important. It's going to help you identify, are there potential off-ramps that you might need to take advantage of in the future, again, as your system design gets a little bit deeper. So being able to imagine alternatives is going to get you a little bit further down the road in understanding the different pieces of what matters. The other thing that I always like to share is that new team members, or in this case, maybe other folks that you're engaging with, are really a great way to help refine ideas as you prepare. So maybe show them your slides, right? Or ask them to read through some of your documentation, because they don't have all the context that you have. You've been working on this for a long time. You're day in, day out, right? 8 hours a day, really focusing on these pieces. You don't know what you're missing because you're so deep in it, right? A new person on your team or someone else is going to give you that viewpoint of, I don't understand what this acronym means. I don't know how this process really works, but you're kind of assuming I already know that. It's telling you, what have you overlooked? So the other thing that I want to throw out here is that between now and SCR, you guys are going to have workshops, right? You're going to cover power, CNDH, ADCS, structures, thermal. You're going to have workshops on all of those. I would put into your calendars the day before, maybe a 30-minute prep session, right? Of where are you in your understanding of those different categories, right? So that you know that when you get into that workshop, you can ask that person, that presenter, all the questions that you need to know, right? So that you can be prepared when you go into SCR and to the later stages of things. So think about, what do you need to know. Don't just wait to see what are they sharing with you. I appreciate the time today. I hopefully this gives you a little bit of food for thought as you are going out on the next 2 weeks. Are there some questions?
Like, how does this differ like largely from like our like presentation, like the content of our presentations, like from the user guide, like it says, like we need a mission overview, experiment plan, con-ops, etc. Like, are we expected to just basically go further in depth, like with more information that would have fit on the slides, like primarily, like into the same, and then like having revised that?
Yeah, you're talking about mission overview versus SCR or?
Yeah, the mission design document versus like the information that we presented, basically.
So mission design document, you're always going to have more room for words, right? So that's going to be like paragraphs, right, of content. And so when you're developing your slides, you're picking from what you think are the most important points to kind of share there, right? Like you only have 2 hours to communicate that. And so you'll have to make some choices about what goes onto the slides, what's in your soundtrack. And so there might be some instances where you say, you know, if you want to go really deep into this analysis or this commentary, that won't always show up in the mission design document, but there might be more detail. Like some people were lucky enough to have a mission that can be summed up with some simple equations. They might go through like the full set of equations, right? That might not make it into your SCR slides, but you would be able to tell someone like, oh, it's all there explaining, you know, why the experiment is set up the way it is. Does that make sense? So yes, it is going deeper to kind of specifically answer your question in the MDD, and you're pulling out, you know, the important things to cover. It's been great chatting with you. Thank you.